Hello friends, we are from Middle Ages Group. Our members, Maria Elsa Stella, Angela Christine, Fatin Farah, and Valentina. First of all, we will have the Latin Christendom. The Christendom. It is a group of people or nations under a Christian set of morals and values. Along with Muslim, the fall of the Roman Empire saw the rise of two Christian communities, Byzantium and the Latin Christendom, with some shared religious and cultural values but vastly different power structures. The communities of Western Europe in this period are generally known as Latin Christendom, while the eastern region of Europe formed a Christian state around the city of Byzantium, or well known as Constantinople. They were under a Christian set of morals and values. Christendom consisted of two distinct groups of functionaries: the sacerdotium, or ecclesiastical hierarchy, and the imperium, or secular leaders. In theory, these two groups complemented each other, attending to people's spiritual and moral needs, respectively. But in practice, the two institutions were constantly sparring, disagreeing, or openly warring with each other. The Byzantine Empire, which was the most sophisticated culture during the antiquity, suffered under Muslim conquest, limiting its scientific prowess during the medieval period. Christian Western Europe had suffered a catastrophic loss of knowledge following the fall of the Western Roman Empire, but thanks to the church scholars such as Aquinas and Buridan, the West carried on at least the spirit of scientific inquiry which would later lead to Europe's taking the lead in science during the scientific revolution using translation of medieval works. Medieval technology refers to the technology used in medieval Europe under Christian rule. After the Renaissance of the 12th century, medieval Europe saw a radical change in the rate of new inventions, innovations in the ways of managing traditional means of production and economic growth. The period saw major technological advances, including the adoption of gunpowder and the astrolabe, the invention of spectacles, and greatly improved watermills, building techniques, agriculture in general, clocks, and ships.
Next, we will talk about feudal society, arising during a period of collapsing central authority, invention, scanty public revenue, and declining commerce on town life. Feudalism attempted to provide some order and security. Feudalism was not a planned system derived logically from general principle, but rather an improvised response to the challenge posed by ineffectual central authority. Next is vassalage. Feudal relationship enabled lords to increase their military strength. The need for military support was the principal reason for the practice of vassalage, in which a knight, in a solemn ceremony, pledged loyalty to a lord. Besides rendering military assistance and supplying knights, the vassal owed several other obligations to his lord in return to the fief and the lord's protection. Feudalism declined when kings converted their theoretical powers into actual powers. Feudal warriors. Feudal lords viewed manual labor and commerce as regarding for men of their rank. They considered only one vocation worthy, that of warrior. Through combat, the lord demonstrated his valor, earned his reputation, measured his individual worth, derived excitement add to his wealth, and defend his rights. Warfare gave meaning to his life. A true knight was expected to fight bravely. As a Christian gentleman, knight was expected to honor the laws of the church and to wield his sword in the service of God. Noblewoman. Feudal society was very much a man's world in theory. Women were deemed to be physically, morally, and intellectually inferior to men. Although the church thought that both men and women were precious to God and that marriage was a sacred right, clergymen view women as evil temptress who, like the biblical Eve, lured men into sin. But as the lady of the castle, she performed important duties. The nunneries provide an outlet for the talents of unmarried noblewomen. Some nuns acquired an education and like their male counterparts. Agrarian society. Feudalism was built on an economic foundation known as manorialism. The manorial village was the means of organizing an agricultural society with limited markets and money. Their ways of life were made possible by the toil of serf. The origins of manorialism can be traced in part to the late Roman Empire. Manorialism was not an orderly system. It consisted of improvised relationships and practice that varied from region to region. Peasants were often held in contempt by lords, and medieval literature routinely depicted them as repulsive creatures, ugly, dirty, cowardly, and uncouth. Serfs did derive some benefits from manorial relationship. They received protection from brigands and warring nobles, and they possessed customary rights, which the lord generally respected, and cottage and farmlands. Economic expansion during the High Middle Ages. Manorialism and feudalism presuppose a hierarchical, organic, and stable social order. During the High Middle Ages, the revival of an urban economy and the reemergence of central authority undermined feudal and manorial relationship. By the end of the 11th century, Europe saw many signs of recovery. The invention of migrants and Vikings had ended, and powerful lords and kings imposed greater order in their territory. Agricultural revolution. By the end of the 13th century, medieval agriculture had reached a technical level far superior to that of the ancient world. One innovation has a heavy plow that cut deeply into the soil. This new plow enabled farmers to work more quickly and effectively. Greater agricultural production reduced the number of deaths from starvation and dietary disease and thus contribute to a population increase. Monastic communities are also actively engaged in this enterprise. Their endeavors during the 11th and 12th century brought vast areas of Europe under cultivation for the first time. The improvement in agricultural technology and the colonization of new lands alters the condition of life in Europe. The revival of trade, expanding agricultural production, the end of Viking attacks, greater political stability, and an increasing population brought about a revival of commerce. In the 12th and 13th centuries, local, regional, and long-distance trade gained such momentum that some historians describe the period as a commercial revolution that surpassed the commercial activity of the Roman Empire during the Pax Romana. Crucial to the growth of trade were international fairs, where merchants and craftspeople set up stalls and booths to display their wares. The last is the rebirth of towns. In the 11th century, towns emerged anew throughout Europe. In the 12th, they become active centers of commercial and intellectual life. Towns were a new and revolutionary force socially, economically, and culturally. A new class of merchants and craftspeople came into being. One reason for town growth was the increased food supply stemming from advances in agricultural technology. Towns emerged in locations that were natural for trade, such as seacoasts, riverbanks, crossroads, and market sites. Women took an active part in the economic life of towns, working with women, usually their husbands, in the various crafts as cobblers, tailors, and so forth. Townspeople or burghers refused to be treated as serfs bound to a lord and liable for personal service and customary use. The activities of townspeople made them a new breed. They engaged in business and had money and freedom.
The rise of states. The vitality of Latin Christendom is signified by its revival of trade and the growth of towns. Moreover, there are a greater order and security provided by the emergence of states. Many educated and trained officials who enforced royal law, tried people in royal courts, and collected royal taxes serving to reduce the power of local lords. Kings are able to expand their territories and develop a strong central government. Such development set the foundations of European states. England and France achieved a large measure of unity during the Middle Ages. On the other hand, Germany and Italy remain divided into numerous independent territories. England. Here's what happened in England during that time. William the Conqueror distributed the rest of the conquered England among the Norman nobles. When Norman replaced the Anglo-Saxon aristocracy and ecclesiastical hierarchy, William the Conqueror kept the sixth of conquered England for himself. In accordance with feudal practice, he distributed the rest among his Norman nobles, who swore an oath of loyalty to William and provided him with military assistance. But he made sure that no feudal baron had enough land or soldiers to threaten his power. The emergence of common law. There was a crucial development in shaping national unity. It was the emergence of common law. During the reigns of Henry I and Henry II, royal judges traveled to different parts of kingdom. Throughout England, important cases to be tried in the king's court rather than in local courts, thereby increasing royal power. The decisions of royal judges were recorded and used as guides for future cases. It also provided a fairer system of justice. Common law remains the foundations of the English legal system and the legal systems of lands settled by English people, including the United States. The Magna Carta. England fighting a costly and losing war with the kings of France. King John has to fix his seal to a document called the Magna Carta or Great Charter when the angry parents rebelled and compelled. The Magna Carta is celebrated as the root of the uniquely English respect for basic rights and liberties. In the 13th century, it became accepted custom that the king should not decide major issues without consulting the advisor, who assembled in the Great Council. English Parliament evolved and became a permanent institution of government. And finally, during the Middle Ages, England became a centralized and unified state. The king, however, did not have unlimited power. He was not above the law. The rights of the people were protected by certain principles implicit in the common law and the Magna Carta, and by the emergence of Parliament. France. These are the several important things happened in France during the medieval time. Hugh Capet to be the king of the Franks. Several years after Charlemagne's death, France faced terrible ordeals. Charlemagne's heirs fought one another for the crown. The Carolingian family, unable to maintain the throne, the great lords bestowed the title of king on one of their own. Finally, they chose Hugh Capet, the Count of Paris, to be the king. In the 13th century, the power of the French monarch continued to grow. Departing from feudal precedent, Louis IX issued ordinances for the entire realms without seeking the consent of his vassal. Kings added to their lands through warfare and marriage. They also devised new ways of raising money, including taxing the clergy. At the beginning of the 14th century, Philip IV, or Philip the Fair, engaged in a struggle with the papacy. Seeking to demonstrate that he had the support of his subjects, Philip convened a national assembly, the Estates General, representing the clergy, the nobility, and the townspeople. This assembly would be called again to vote funds for the crowns, but the Estates General never became an important body in French political life, and it never succeeded in controlling the monarch. Finally, by the end of the Middle Ages, French kings had succeeded in creating a unified state, but regional and local loyalties remained strong and persisted for centuries. In Germany, after the destructions of Charlemagne's empire, the German territories were broken into large duchies. Otto the Great entered into an alliance with German bishop and archbishop, who could provide him with fighting men and trained administrator. Later, the Pope crowned Otto Emperor of the Romans, which then would be changed to Holy Roman Emperor. Otto and his successor wanted to dominate Italy and the Pope. The papacy itself allied itself with the German dukes and the Italian cities, enemy of the emperor. The interventions in papal and Italian politics was the principal reason why German territories did not achieve unity in the Middle Ages. Growth of papal power. Papal here means father, and it refers to the Bishop of Rome, or what we recognize now as the Pope. The supreme priest, which its role was derived from Saint Peter's role as the leader of worldwide Catholic Church. In the medieval civilization, the Bible here is very powerful. In the High Middle Ages, a growing religious vitality accompanied by the economic recovery and increased political stability. It was marked by several developments within the church, especially papacy increases its power, holy war drew the Christian community closer. The churches were very determined to make the society follow defined standard. They try to shape all institutions and cultural expressions so that they can be considered appropriate according to the Christian outlook. Clergy imposed and supervised the moral standards of Christendom, and as the divine grace was channeled through the sacrament, which only can be administered by the clergy, it makes them the indispensable intermediary between the individual and God, and for those who resist it will be given the penalty and excommunications. During the papal power, there was a reform movement within the church called the Gregorian Reform. By the 10th century, the church becomes the Western Europe landholder for the most part of the land in Italy and vast properties in other lands were owned by the church, but the papacy cannot command or having a leadership positions over Latin Christendom. Therefore, Pope Gregory VII initiated the Gregorian reform, which its main concern were the moral integrity and independence of the clergy. At first, there is an issue who would be the leader of the church, therefore the Gregorian reform was made, and the reform is to promote the way to free the church from the evil ruler of the world. It resulted in new ways and new degree of the collections of canon law that were being assembled. Basically, Gregorian reforms cover these things: to instruct the rulers in the proper use of God-given power, to assert the preeminence of the papacy over both the church hierarchy and secular rulers, and to give the kings a solemn duty to obey the instructions. If they fail, the Pope could deny his right to rule. The Crusades. It involves several religious knightly military orders, such as the Knights Templar, the Teutonic Knights, and the Hospitallers. They attempt to defend the Holy Land and protected Christian pilgrims when traveling to and from the Holy Land. Although the Crusades' result is the European defeated and the Muslim wins, many argue that the European still managed to successfully extend the reach of Christianity and Western civilization. The Roman Catholic Church experienced an increase in wealth, and the power of the Pope was elevated during the Crusades. During the Crusades, trade and transportation also improved throughout Europe because war created a constant demand for supplies and transportations. There was a heightened interest in travel and learning throughout Europe after the Crusades, which many believe that it may have paved the way for the Renaissance. Dissenters and reformers. Freedoms of religion is an unusual concept to the medieval outlook. To the church, heretics had committed treasons against God and were carriers of a deadly infection. Here are some dissenters and reformers in medieval church. They are the Waldensians, the Cathari, the Franciscan and the Dominicans, and also Innocent III. The Waldensians or the Waldenses or Valdenses are the members of religious dissent, the Christian movement devotees that sought to follow Christ in poverty and simplicity. The Cathari is a Christian dualist or Gnostic movement of fundamentalists who believed there were two gods, a good one who ruled the spiritual world and an evil one who ruled the physical world. These people even viewed sex within marriage and reproductions as evil, so they lived in a strict abstention. The Franciscan and the Dominicans, the best known and most important mendicant orders, which in this period consist of the friars minor and the friars preachers, known as Franciscan and Dominicans. Innocent III, the apex of papal power, he made the papacy the center of European political life. He forcefully asserted the theory of papal monarchy. He claimed the authority to intervene in the internal affairs of secular rulers when they are threatening the good order of Christendom. Christian and Jew. In relation to the Jew in the medieval, Christian showed hatred for Jews and regards them as the alien group in society dominated by the Christian worldview. But medieval Jews managed to maintain their faith, expanded their traditions of biblical and legal scholarships, and developed a flourishing Hebrew literature. The works of Jewish translators, doctors, and philosophers contributed substantially to the flowering of medieval culture in the High Middle Ages.
And then now we are going to talk about the decline of the papacy. The principal sign of the decline of medieval civilization in the late Middle Ages was the waning authority and the prestige of the papacy. In the High Middle Ages, the papacy had been the dominant institution in Christendom, but in the late Middle Ages its power weakened. Many pious Christians felt that the Pope was behaving more like a secular ruler than like an apostle of the Christ. Political theorists and church reformers further undermined papal authority. And there are three conflicts about the decline of the papacy. The first one is conflict with France in 1296 in the bull Clericis Laicos. Here, Pope Boniface VIII decreed that kings and lords who imposed taxes on clergy and the clergy who paid them would be excommunicated. Far from bowing to the Pope's threat, Philip acted forcefully to assert his authority over the church in his kingdom. Boniface backed down from his position, declaring that the French king could tax the clergy in times of national emergency. Thus, the matter was resolved to the advantage of the state. And a second dispute had more disastrous consequences for Boniface because here Philip tried and imprisoned a French bishop despite Boniface's warning that this was an illegal act and violation of church law and tradition, which held that the church, not the state, that must judge the clergy. And then Philip summoned the first meeting of the Estates General to gain the backing of the nation, but shortly afterward Boniface threatened to excommunicate Philip. And the next conflict is about the Great Schism and the conciliar movement. Here, during the first half of the 15th century, church councils met at Pisa in 1409 and then the second one at Constance in 1414 until 1418 and then the last one at Basel in 1431 until 1449 in order to end schism, combat heresy, and reform the church. The conciliar movement attempted to reform the papal monarchy into a constitutional system, in which the Pope's power would be regulated by a general council. Supporters of the movement held that the papacy couldn't reform the church as effectively as a general council representing the clergy. But the conciliar movement ended in failure. As the Holy Roman Emperor and the French monarch withdrew support from the councils, the papacy regained its authority over the higher clergy. and in 1460, Pope Pius II condemned the conciliar movement as heretical. And the last conflict that we are going to discuss is about 14th century heresies. It is about threat to papal power and to the medieval ideal of universal Christian community, who questioned the function and authority of entire church hierarchy. These heretics in the late Middle Ages were forerunners of the Protestant Reformation, and the two principal dissenters were the Englishman John Wycliffe and the Bohemian Jan Hus. By stressing a personal relationship between the individual and God, and by claiming that the Bible itself, rather than church teaching, was the ultimate Christian authority. Wycliffe challenged the fundamental position of the medieval church that avenue to salvation passed through the church alone. He denounced the wealth of the higher clergy and sought a return to the spiritual purity and material poverty of the early church. And the last but not least, we are going to discuss about the Middle Ages and modern world. Medieval civilization began to decline in the 14th century, but no dark age comparable to the 3 centuries following Rome's fall descended on Europe. Its economic and political institutions, also technological skills, had grown too strong. And then feudal traditions lasted long after the Middle Ages. Up until the French Revolution, French aristocrats enjoy special privileges and exercised power over local government. And then in England, the aristocracy controlled local government until the Industrial Revolution transformed English society in the 19th century. Retaining the medieval ideal of the noble warrior, aristocrats continued to dominate the officer corps of European armies through the 19th century and even into the 20th. And then, believing that God's law was superior to state or national decrees, medieval philosophers provided a theoretical basis for opposing tyrannical kings who violated Christian principles. And the idea that both the ruler and the ruled are bound by higher law would, in a secularized form, become a principal element of modern liberal thought. And then a rational soul had to be guided by divine light. For all medieval philosophers, the natural order depended on a supernatural order for its origin and purpose. To understand the natural world properly, it was necessary to know its relationship to the higher world. The discoveries of reason had to accord with Scripture as interpreted by the Church. So that's all the discussion about the Middle Ages from our group today. We would like to say thank you for listening and see you in another discussion. Bye bye.